Hello and welcome to my presentation in Second Life. I'm Claire and I'll be talking to you today about legal education. Legal education is often constrained by many factors. Today I'm going to try to change the way we think about legal education. No matter what subject is considered, at its heart is a story. Law is no exception. Cases tell a story. Legislation paints a picture of the legal frameworks. The judiciary adds commentary to create a rich tapestry of interwoven stories. Yet often this is forgotten in law schools, and the content of the curricula is often rigidly adhered to. What is questionable is whether the traditional methods of teaching our students are the best way of teaching our students. It is widely acknowledged within education that we learn best by doing, through play and through interactions with others. In law, we have an advantage. Our subject area already tells a story. It can pique a student's interest and it can show clearly what motivates the students and what they care about. Today, we're going to be looking at how I am using emergent learning in my own courses within virtual worlds. These are the aims of the presentation: to discuss the possibility of 3D virtual world environments to afford legal education, to see a lesson plan in action for banking and finance law students, to understand the learning theory behind the virtual debate, and to appreciate the importance of the sense of self-identity in 3D virtual world learning environments. Education has moved on. Today's students are no longer the people our education system was designed to teach. If we consider a lecture for a moment, and many great thinkers have already done so, lectures are, or could be described to be, a process in which information passes from the notes of the lecturer into the notes of the student without passing through the minds of either. Is this really what we want to be doing to our students and also to ourselves? Going even further back in time, Confucius stated that I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. So why is our educational system about hearing and forgetting and not about doing and understanding? I wanted to make banking law a little bit more interesting, so I came up with a lesson plan for teaching banking regulation within a virtual environment and through a debate. The work is also backed up with reflective logs and a learning portfolio contained within our university's VLE. The lesson plan is based on experiential and situated learning theories. The students will be contained within a seminar group, are divided into two teams, a red and a blue team. They are given a brief and an asset inventory containing pertinent documents that you would normally put in a reading list. Within the brief is a mind map of all the different aspects of banking regulation from the creation of a bank in the 1600s to the present day, so that the students have a starting point from which to create their argument. They're not just given nothing and asked to go away and create a debate. They are guided. The students have one semester to research and draft a legal argument to present within the world's under assessment criteria. This is the prep zone. As you can see here, there are red and blue hats which the students put on to depict which team they are in. The students will be put randomly into this red and blue group. The purple balls that you can see in front of you are actually seats, so the avatars, i.e. the students' creation of themselves within a virtual world, can go and sit on these and hear what the tutor has to say about the forthcoming assessment and virtual world simulation. There are also two screens, one depicting the Financial Services Authority and the main political person involved with the FSA creation, and the Bank of England and the political person who promotes the growth of the Bank of England rather than the FSA as primary regulator. We're going to skip over the next two slides of the detail of the lesson, but if anyone wants to know more, then please just drop me an email and I'd be happy to share. The students will also be given the rules of the game, and as you can see I've briefly put a few of the rules up here. For instance, the rules outline how the debate works in practice. The virtual world gives the students the possibility of practicing their debate without inhibitions in an immersive world even before the assessment day. The tutor will take on the role of the judge and will open and close the debate and lead the questions during the big debate. The judge will also go through the rules of the big debate at the beginning of the courtroom session. Each student will take it in turn to stand up and make a point and/or rebut the other group's argument. The big debate must be conducted in accordance with courtroom rules and etiquette. Again, the students will be given these out in their inventories so that they can get familiar with them before the actual debate day. After each student has spoken twice in turn, the judge will ask each group a series of questions. Any students in the question group will be able to answer, and on the screen are examples of the questions the students could be asked. The judge will then call the session to a close, and one student will stand and make a closing speech as to why their team is the better regulator. The session will last 1 hour. The judge will then issue a 10-minute break, decide on the most persuasive arguments, and when the group reconvenes will pronounce the winner. The students will then be asked to write a paper on an aspects of banking regulation and asked to hand this in. The big debate will be formatively assessed as the two parts, the debate and the written assignment, will comprise 50% of the mark, a 50 and 50 split. The debate element of the assessment will be individually assessed, as will be the written assessment. So what are the advantages? Well, as you can see, I've just listed a few of the advantages. The students are learning in an immersive environment, therefore they're actually learning by doing. They're actively partaking in their learning. They're going to be organising meetings, they're going to be organising debates, practices, questions. They are in a virtual courtroom as we are now, and they will be able to have that sense of presence, which we will move on to further into this presentation. The students are more engaged, they're inquisitive, they're learning by themselves, they learn through their peers, they have to think for themselves, and they can learn by failure and success in a safe environment. And more importantly, the students can have fun whilst learning. Some more advantages. We can see that experiential learning can be fostered and overcome the inadequacies of face-to-face experiential learning. So for example, if I was doing this in face-to-face real-world situations, students will be shy, they won't want to speak, they may have disabilities. So a virtual world experiential learning can overcome some of these social inhibitions. So let's move on to the theory, experiential learning. To underpin this project, I have used experiential learning theory. This theory is a participatory method of learning and, as Kolb states, the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. Knowledge results from the combination of grasping and transforming experience. In other words, learning evolves from experiencing a situation and learning from it. This project is also using role-play and simulation aspects of learning theory, and we don't have time to go through these here, but please do look at the literature detailing the use of these learning methods in virtual worlds. Situated learning is very similar in content and structure to experiential learning, and indeed the latter leads into the former often. Lev and Wenger put forward the notion of situated learning as learning that takes place in the same context in which it is applied. Therefore, by placing the students within a virtual world and immersing them in an environment where they can take on the personas of the people and the policies they are studying, the students are learning via experience and situation. As Brookfield states, experiential learning thus involves a direct encounter with the phenomenon being studied rather than merely thinking about the encounter or only considering considering the possibility of doing something about it. The second part of this presentation discusses the notion of presence, co-presence and the sense of self within a virtual world, and how it is important to establish a strong sense of self in order to fully engage in the learning environment afforded by virtual worlds. This is all linked to identity, and students have to have a strong sense of identity in self before immersive and emergent learning can take place. So, let's look at this picture. This is a picture of me, my avatar, visiting the Sistine Chapel in Rome. I have visited the Sistine Chapel both in Second Life and in the physical world, and I can tell you I liked it much better in Second Life because I was the only visitor. I view me, myself and my avatar as being one and the same thing. As Bellastroff suggests, avatars make virtual worlds real but not actual. They are a position from which the self encounters the virtual. To be able to view and perceive myself as an avatar, academics have suggested that imagination plays a part in our acceptance of our presented presence in the virtual space through the body of our avatar. Therefore, my imagination made me feel as if I was in the Sistine Chapel. I could see the pictures, I had a sense of depth and space, and indeed my imagination made me feel as if my tummy had gone over when I flew up to the ceilings to view the paintings. This sense of vertigo is not just related to in-world flying, but let's look at the next slide. Indeed, I can get vertigo anywhere. In Verona, Kew Gardens, Lake Garda, Leaning Tower of Pisa, Florence's massive Duomo Tower, and in Vinci, where I just managed to crawl along the floor, stand up, smile, and hurl myself to the floor again. All of these places I have been to. What is interesting is that I have experienced the same kind of feelings and emotions when I visited the Sistine Chapel in Second Life as I did visiting all these other places in real life. So why is this, and why is it important? Well, there is a strong relationship between the body and the imagination. My imagination was thus allowing my body to feel what I perceived to be real when flying in the Sistine Chapel. I was able to draw on the physical world experiences, and my imagination sent signals to affect my body. The mind and the imagination is therefore inherently linked. It is this linkage which is essential when exploring the sense of presence, co-presence and sense of self within virtual worlds, and why virtual worlds can be used for educational purposes with great effect. So what is presence? The first thing we need to consider is what is presence. As you can see from these definitions on the slide, there have been many academic contributions as to what is presence. In short, presence is the sense of being there. To build on this is the response of being there and the individual memory of being there. I remember being in the Sistine Chapel, both physically and virtually, as if they were the same, but despite on one visit, I was actually sat in my office in Herefordshire. The nexus of the argument of presence is the involvement and immersion necessary to experience presence. It is this involvement and immersion which virtual worlds offer us because of the surroundings, the environment and the depth of perception, and this is why I've built a virtual courtroom. So what is co-presence? Building on the notion of presence is co-presence, and that is the sense of being together and the connection of minds, a joining of others in a similar environment, sharing these similar or same experiences and being perceived as part of a group. The importance of co-presence in a virtual world cannot be underestimated. Virtual world education is to learn via distance, but it is not the traditional form of distance learning. Indeed, virtual worlds afford the student the opportunity to be part of a cohesive group. Co-presence is present in virtual worlds because avatars can interact via actions, speech and text. These three mediums allow for relationships to be forged, thus allowing educational advancement to take place. The idea of learning by doing and learning through interaction of one's peers is not isolated in the physical world. It can be simulated in virtual worlds to create co-presence. This is why I am using a sense of team to create co-presence. What is social presence? The third aspect I mentioned previously is social presence. This builds upon co-presence, as we can see from these definitions on the slide, and attain to the idea of the interactions that take place within a virtual world through the benefits of presence and co-presence. By building relationships with other avatars within a virtual world, you are then afforded the ability to interact in different tasks and learn via peer interaction similar to that of the physical world. Although it is similar, it could be argued that virtual worlds offer a greater ability to interact through social presence in a group, because virtual worlds break down the barriers that can prevent presence being placed in a normal classroom in the physical world. The self-consciousness and social awkwardness that can occur within a classroom is taken away in a virtual environment, and the students can therefore just concentrate on the learning task rather than their social insecurities. The fourth notion, important when examining and learning in virtual worlds, is the notion of sense of self. In other words, how the person is perceived by others and how they perceive themselves. Bocker believes that each one of us has many perceived models of our body, and that the virtual body influences and carries a social meaning for other users. In a virtual world, we can be anything or anyone, from a dragon to a rabbit to a baby penguin, and this representation of self is perceived differently depending on how you are presenting yourself. This understanding of self is important in learning, and especially so for a tutor leading a class, and careful consideration needs to be paid when choosing your avatar self. A sense of place and presence. One of the common themes associated with presence and co-presence is the idea that if the user is present with someone else in the place, therefore the place is relevant to the concept of presence and to the understanding of how we respond to virtual environments. So why does it matter? In order for communication to take place, the actors must possess an acute sense of self, others, and verbal and non-verbal cues. The place and the context for communication is important. Maneke suggests that communication is a joint activity that requires interaction and a sense of presence between two or more social actors. Therefore, avatars or students need to be aware of their sense of self and their presence, co-presence within a virtual world for effective learning to take place. Maneke further explains this by demonstrating that the virtual world is different to other forms of media in that it features two different factors which contribute to the sense of place and presence. Firstly, there is the availability of a shared virtual space, so the courtroom that we have here. And secondly, there is a temporal persistence of place. In other words, the Sistine Chapel I visited could have been visited by other people at the same or different times to myself. When I left the Sistine Chapel, it did not cease to exist. It is persistent within the virtual world. Maneke further examines this notion by stating that when considering places in a virtual environment, it is useful to recognise that these virtual spaces have meaning, just as real-world places do. This sense of place and presence allows the students a richness of learning because they have been immersed in the environment. They are learning by doing because they can imagine, they can feel, and they can see, and they can interact with the places, landscapes, and social cues exhibited from others in the world. My avatar is me. Imagine, physical, virtual, we or I can empathise with the avatar experience that I am seeing on the screen because I have the ability to use my imagination. This has a huge and significant impact on distance learning. I, or the students, have a sense of being there and being with others during tutorials. If we think back to my visit to the Sistine Chapel and my other vertigo-inducing pictures, I have been there and I have experienced the environment. Virtual worlds allow the user to be immersed into the virtual environment, thus giving a different and innovative way of learning and teaching. Immersion, collaboration, presence, co-presence and sense of self all allow the learner and the tutor a more rewarding and effective teaching mechanism. How this is achieved will need considerable thinking for each and every one of our curriculum. One thing I know is that learning by doing is rewarding and effective, and I want my students to be able to experience this. Therefore, in conclusion, inherent in any form of learning is the notion that immersion is proven to be an effective and efficient way of learning at high levels. The use of virtual worlds afford the opportunity to explore these educational learning theories in a new and an innovative manner to ensure effective social learning takes place in legal education. Many thanks for listening to my presentation today, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you. Goodbye.